Welcome to the Alkemy Capital Shareholder Call, everybody. I think everyone should be familiar with the technology that we're using, but just to give you a quick overview, um, we are going to hand over to Paul Athley, Chairman, and Vicky Jekyll, the CEO, to go through today's news and to provide other updates around progress so far. And if anyone would like to ask a question during the call or to submit a question during the call, there's a little Q&A box. It should be at the bottom of your screens, and you can pop your question in there, and we will try our best to answer it. And there have been some pre-submitted questions as well. Also, we're very open to anybody asking a question using their own voice as well. So please raise your hand and I will hopefully spot that and I can ask you to unmute yourself and you can ask a question directly as well. So yeah, please don't be shy, don't be afraid to pop into some questions. And yeah, we're going to get I think hopefully a fairly comprehensive overview and update from Paul and Vicky. So handing over to you guys. I don't know who wants to take it away.
Sasha, thanks very much. Really appreciate you setting up the call, and I just wanted to give a brief introduction before handing over to Vicky, and just to sort of set the scene and remind everybody that Alkemy itself is actually a holding company. So I think we've got a market capitalization of around £13 million at the moment, and the idea was it would incubate these subsidiary companies which would go and finance at the asset level. So the first cab off the rank is Tees Valley Lithium, which is the company that Vicky is the CEO of. And the challenge is to be able to finance at the asset level. So rather than trying to finance Train 1, which is $250 million at the Alkemy level, we are looking to finance at the Tees Valley Lithium level, which today's announcement is a big milestone into potentially solving that complex challenge. So you recall a few weeks ago we announced that we were working with ABG Sundal Collier. They are our debt providers. So if you think about where we're going to get the debt from to fund TVL, that will come through them, through bond or debt providers. But to get to the point where we can draw down the debt, we need equity, and to get to the excuse me, and get to the point where we can draw down the equity, we need to complete a feed study. So this is where big private equity steps in, and we're delighted to have signed an exclusivity agreement with Ara Partners, who are a $6 billion private equity firm out of the US, who have, I think they've made about 50 investments so far, many similar to TVL. That is, they've taken on small companies and backed them all the way through to cash flow. And they've done a number of investments already in the UK, not least of which PX Group, who we know well and look forward to working with. So the purpose of today's call is to introduce the idea that hopefully if we can get ARA across the line, we will be fully funded through our feed studies and for the equity component for the main finance, which we can then get the debt from ABG. But it's within our gift now to, one is to help ARA across the line, and then secondly is to complete the feed studies to be able to get to what's known as FID, which is final investment decision. So we're in very, very good hands with our new CEO, Vicky Jekyll. And so I want to hand over at this point to Vicky to listen to the progress that she's taken the company through over the last few weeks and months to get us to this point, and how we're going to get from here to FID. So Vicky, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. And it's great to have everybody join us again. This is sort of the second shareholder call, an investor call that I've been part of. So it's great to be able to sort of talk to you directly and provide you with an update on what's going on. So hopefully news flow's been good and you've seen that. We've been progressing well. On our last call, we talked about the feed study and about the importance of that. So working with both Wave International as our engineering partners and Veolia as our technology partners, we've been able to really make an advancement and progress through that feed study. And we're getting constant sort of output from that consistently now. And part of that is some of the announcement that we've made today. So one of those key optimizations that we've been able to make early on is improve the capacity of the plant. So we're now looking at 25,000 tonnes per annum instead of 24,000 tonnes per annum. So that's great news. That comes at no extra capital cost, which is also great. And so, yeah, so we're going to continue through that. We've always talked about delivering an interim feed study as we progress, and that's something that we're still keen to do. And we're on track to do. In a relatively short space of time, we should be able to release some more information to market with regards to the progress of that feed study. And the idea behind all of that is really being about sort of the technical de-risking of our project, and those activities that we've been doing, and all the work that we've been pulling together and progressing on, that's allowed us to get to the position where we are now with ARA. So Paul has much more experience with ARA than I have from previous sort of engagements. But we've been dealing with ARA for some time now. We've been having some discussions with them. For those of you who aren't familiar, please go ahead and check them out sort of on their website. They've got almost sort of, over 6 billion, almost 7 billion in assets under management. They're sort of active in 40 different projects, and they really focus on that decarbonisation. So they're a great sort of partner for what we're looking for. And what we're looking at, and why are we engaged with them now, and why are we at this kind of stage now? Well, it's really sort of, it's selecting the right time and the right valuation point within the business. So what we've done is we've now progressed the feed study to a position that allows us to offer the best sort of opportunity for both any partner coming in, but also for Alkemy and Alkemy shareholders. So with ARA's experience and in this particular region and in these particular investments, we feel that they're a great partner to move forward. And as Paul alluded to and was talking about with regards to both in our development phase, so looking at them supporting from an equity or an investment perspective now to complete us to get us through our development phase, but then also as a long-term partner. And I think that's the critical part of what we've really been looking for. So I can see some in the background, I can see some questions coming through on the questions and answers, and one of them is, why ARA? Why are we giving them exclusivity? And there's no guarantees, and where are we going with that? So maybe if I can sort of give you a tiny little background as to how we got to where we are today, to this exclusivity agreement. So obviously part of our conversations, we've been discussing with ARA, we've been reviewing our project and where we're up to. Off the back of that, we've had the indicative offer with regards to what this would look like, bringing ARA on as a partner. And we were comfortable with what that looked like, so we were willing to progress with that. Internally, ARA, as with any sort of one of these funds, it goes through their own investment committees, is something that they're interested in. And off the back of that, they opted to continue and want to engage with us. And a part of that, they requested exclusivity. So what I can say is this is all off the back of them having access to the data room so they can see more information. There's still due diligence to be done. You're absolutely right. It's not funding completion, but what we felt that we're in a position where we found a partner who understands us, understands the business, and understands the vision of where we're going to. And we felt it was the right time, the right partner, and at the right stage of the negotiations to agree to the exclusivity going forward. So that's what we're working on now, and that's what we'll continue to progress. And so that's sort of great news. And I know there's going to be lots more questions around that, but I just wanted a couple of quick minutes to just talk about everything else and Tees Valley Lithium and where we're up to. So as I mentioned, we're progressing the feed study, and that's going at pace. You'll have also seen, if you subscribe to our newsletter, we've just announced today that we've set up some offices up in Darlington. So we're moving our head office closer to the site, so more local, so we can engage more closely. We can set up the project team as we continue to progress closer to the site and easier to work with the environment there. And so that's a great sort of momentum going forward. And I know the other thing that probably people will be interested in is understanding is where we are with our binding feedstock agreements with Touchstone. So Touchstone are funding a mine in South America, and they are building that out, and they're fully funding that. We are in the final stages of that negotiation. We're just in discussions with regards to specifications. For those of you who are familiar with the marketplace, any sort of raw material coming in, the price you pay is directly linked to the quality of the product, and that will be down to the impurities, the actual purity of the lithium content. And so those final tweaks are happening at the moment. We're in talks with our technical team and their technical team, and we're reviewing all of those in the hopes that we can get that progressed and get that completed as soon as possible. And that, alongside with the progress of the FEED study and the progress with ARA, we feel we're in a really confident position to be in to still achieve our final investment decision later this year. Okay, so I think it's probably just useful, Sasha, Paul, should we just dive into some questions, and then probably more will come out as we dive into questions. Does that make sense?
I think so, Vicky.
Yeah, agreed, Vicky. So we've got some pre-submitted questions, and I think you've covered a lot of them, though. But do you want to? I mean, there's a Q&A box if you can dismiss a couple of them, but there's nothing wrong with reiteration, right?
Yeah.
Let's allow Rob to talk, though. We've got one a raised hand here. If you could unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello. Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Congratulations on getting to this stage, and very much looking forward to you getting this over the line. Could you talk a bit about market conditions, particularly on the demand side, please, Vicky? Because I noticed that the Chinese manufacturer AESC made a pretty significant announcement that they're going to build a new gigafactory near Sunderland. That announcement was last week. So it does seem to me that the demand dynamics are actually starting to recover. And obviously there's a great emphasis at the moment on, to use the phrase, the geoeconomics of all of this, and securing supply chain for the UK and European EV industries. So just a few words on the demand environment, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thanks, and thanks for the question. Yeah, so market conditions, there's no shying away from it. They've been difficult. Lithium's still not in its it's in one of its lowest pricing forms, over the last few years, and that's obviously detracted, from investment. But what we need to look at and what we're focused on is what that long-term outlook looks like. So, absolutely, some of the work that's happening, and some of the work that's happening to deliver those projects in the UK is great. The links, the Sunderland Gigafactory, closely located. Obviously, you've got Agratas and Tata bringing their gigafactory to the UK. There's a lot of development that's happening. What I would say is one of the initial sort of drivers for the market conditions is always from a regulatory perspective as to when the UK and when Europe was going to switch to zero emission vehicles. And in the last sort of couple of months, Europe as a significant market has confirmed that they're sticking to their 2035 deadline. And so they're progressing that. And so that's on top of that, they've got the Critical Raw Materials Act that looks for sort of 40% locally produced or locally processed material that goes into batteries. So all of these things are driving from a regulatory perspective. But we've hit the turning point with the automotive industry, because they're designing, and they're building their electric vehicles. Sort of a timeline to develop a new vehicle is about 5 years. And so they're already well into that sort of program of switching over to the electric vehicle, and that demand's coming. Yes, it's taken a little bit longer, but what we see is that the market we expect the market to enter a structural deficit for lithium from 2027 onwards. with us looking to be operational towards the end of 2027, early 2028, it's a perfect timing for us to be able to capitalize on that European market requirement and progress forward. And you're absolutely right. Probably the geopolitics of what we've seen over the last few months has really sort of accelerated what companies are doing in order to try to secure and develop a resilient supply chain. So bearing in mind where we are in our progress, and our time has been busy with meetings across the whole supply chain, from mines looking for places to process their material, through cathode manufacturers that we're working on specification approval with, to cell manufacturers and the auto companies. And we're engaged across the supply chain. And it feels that in the last sort of 3 months, that sort of sense of urgency has returned.
Thanks very much. Congrats again.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Just raise your hand again if you've got another question, please. Okay. If anyone else, please remember to use the box or just ask yourself as well. I'm going to read one of the pre-submitted questions. Vicky, apologies if you've covered any of these, which you probably have, but could you please clarify whether the proposed investment would provide full funding to complete TVL's front-end engineering design, feed study, and cover the equity component required for the project to reach final investment decision?
Okay, so I'm happy to start, and then Paul can add any comments that he's got in it. So what I can say today is that the exclusivity agreement includes both of those. So both the funding and the feed funding to get us through, and then equity component going forward through to final investment decision. In essence, it progresses as to allow us to sort of progress the financing, the wider financing work stream, so the debt that Paul was talking about earlier on, and ensuring we're sort of fully capitalized by construction. And so that's what the agreement allows us to do.
Thank you, Vicky. Let's take another pre-submitted and then work our way through the Q&A box. So does this mean that ARA have an exclusivity period over the full equity component of train 1, i.e. the circa 500 million? That's the way I am reading it.
Mm-hmm. At this stage, yes. Yes, yeah, that's correct. Okay.
Is this first one in the Q&A box appropriate to read out?
Yes, yeah, that's fine, no problem. Yeah.
Okay. I noticed that the CEO of PX Group commented on Vicky's LinkedIn post about supporting the project. Can you share anything on this, please?
PX Group is part of ARA, so it's great that there's obviously different communities and different companies involved in that. I actually have a sort of a separate link to PX Group as well, because I used to work for a company called Lift H2 in the hydrogen space, and PX Group just invested in them in Germany. So there are other links. So sometimes adding 2 and 2 you get 5, but we would be stupid to ignore PX Group as partners to ARA to see whether there's any support that they could give us as the project progresses. So it's all up for grabs and up in discussion.
Okay. Thanks, Vicky. Another one from the Q&A box. Steve, brilliant effort, Vicky, Paul. Does today's and recent news speed up to recruitment process? I think it means the recruitment process.
I hope so. Yeah. No, we are. So we continue to progress with that. We're trying to be sort of prudent, and a lot of those sort of startups that we've seen that haven't progressed have gone too quick, too fast in building out teams and things like that. So what we've been doing is we've been utilizing sort of third-party skills and experience with sort of Wave Engineer and Wave International and Veolia. They have a lot of skills and experience, but yes, we're progressing with that, and we will progress with that in line with the announcement today.
Thank you, Vicky. Okay, we have a raised hand from John. John, I'm just asking you to unmute here. Oops. Are you there, John?
Sam, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Yeah, no, that's great news today, Vicky and Paul. Delighted to hear it. And also just there's a bit of feedback. I think the CEO insights and the comms is fantastic. So please keep that up. The questions around. I'm assuming that the exclusivity agreement is for train 1. Is there any discussion around trains 2 to 4, or am I just getting ahead of myself?
Paul, do you want to take it or do you want me to?
Thanks, Vicky. So, John, and for all, so this is for train 1, and I don't want to talk out of school here, but ARA is a $6 billion fund and looks to grow things. So, I think it's true to say that the future plans would be to give ARA first right of refusal for future expansions. And Vicky's already got trains 2, 3, and 4 in her mind. And as we've talked previously on this call, we've looked at we previously announced a graphite deal, and we've previously mentioned manganese. So train 1 right now, but if and the way possibly best to describe ARA's approach is they see it as a partnership rather than just a straight investment. So they would look to help grow the company, and if the company's expansion plans involve trains 2, 3, and 4 for lithium, and also for graphite and perhaps manganese, then hopefully ARA will be there with us along the journey all the way.
That's great. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Right, back to the pre-submitted questions, Vicky. I think you covered this, but what do you think drew ARA partners to TVL at this stage of development, and why have you chosen to give them an exclusive negotiation period?
Yeah, so as we said, ARA, based on their whole ethos and the decarbonisation that they focus on, the fact that they have an internal builders team, with construction and project management and experience, they're there to help and to support. And so that was really important for us, with a partner. We've had lots of discussions over the previous months with different funds and different potential partners. And when we got to the stage that we're at with ARA, we did feel it was the right decision for Alkemy to progress, both in shared vision and execution capability. But yeah, also based on where we are in that process. We believe that we've seen sufficient interest from ARA that it made sense to focus the negotiations with ARA and to move them forward to completion.
Thank you, Vicky. We've got that same question just come in I'm just trying to see if it's very similar, this one, just in from Steve. Okay, no. The next one. So what does the timeline look like from here to FID, and what are the remaining milestones to watch for?
So we're still aiming to achieve sort of FID towards the end of this year. So we're talking sort of end of Q3, early Q4 is our aim. And so things are progressing. So the FEED study is progressing on track in timing in that sense. Obviously, we're progressing the conversations with ARA in parallel. Paul and Sam and others we're working hard and with regards to the other financing with ABG and to secure so that when we get to final investment decision, we're fully capitalized and we're ready to go. So as far as we're concerned internally, everything is moving on track to get to FID. So the major milestones are obviously going to be completing this deal with ARA, the completion of the binding feedstock agreement, which we hope to happen, within a short period of time, and continuing those conversations with the potential offtake customers. They're the key milestones to get us to FID.
Okay, Vicky, there's loads of questions in the
I know.
I'm going to read out this last one, and
okay.
maybe turn it over to you because there might be some repetition that I may not have noticed. But
Okay.
how does the exclusivity impact the timing and structure of the broader financing strategy?
Paul, do you want to take that one whilst I sift through the Q&As?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. It is the broader financing strategy. Just to reflect on what we talked about earlier, ARA see this as a partnership in which they provide equity, and also, as Vicky's mentioned, these other collaborations. So if we get this right with ARA and ARA are comfortable and they like the story, that is Train 1 and beyond, we would see this as a long-term relationship between TVL and ARA to grow this business. And you look across into ARA's investments into other companies, they have a track record of growing relatively small businesses into relatively large businesses. So I perhaps answer the question by saying this is the grand financing strategy for TVL.
Okay, I'm gonna race through because we've got about 16 questions in the Q&A section. So let me try and answer quick fire as many of them as we possibly can. And anything we didn't get to, we will certainly can respond, but we should be able to get through them all. So the first one is Touchstone. How is it progressing? Does it have an exclusivity close date? If so, when is that? It doesn't necessarily have a close date, but we are progressing and we do anticipate it to be announced shortly. So I don't want to give you a specific date because it's not necessarily all in our hands, but we are pushing that through as fast as we possibly can to get that secured. With regards to the next question, with regards to what is the plan regarding preserving implementing planning permission? Will we achieve all the milestones ahead of November 2025 deadline in order to take the lease off the site, or will we be asking the landlord to commence the works on our behalf? So there's always remediation works that will happen by the landlord in the first instance. So they're always first on site to do that, to remediate the land, to get it to the right specification that we would require. Planning permissions in place by November. We can extend if we need to. We see planning permission being one of the lower risks for the project, having already secured planning permission, being in a chemical industrial park with existing planning permission in place for the whole sort of site. We believe that that's sort of one of the lower concerns and the lower risks. But we do have a strategy in place where we can extend that. We can apply to extend that if we need to. Is the AESC news a gift to TVL? Well, it's always helpful with timing, isn't it? Look, it's always great news. The UK industry needed it. We needed it. We continue to need those boosts. I think Europe needed it as well, if I'm honest, with regards to localization. And we certainly weren't upset when the news came out. Okay, so with the tight timeline for July for the equity, when do you see the bond element coming on board and wrapping up the full finance? So as Paul alluded to, we are aiming to get to our final investment decision at end of Q3, beginning of Q4, and that will require the full financing for us to be fully capitalized at that position. So we are working hard now. We don't stop. We haven't stopped, and we continue to work hard through to that to secure all of the necessary debt financing as well as equity investments in order to get to that FID in time. And yes, timeline's always tight, but based on who we're talking to and the conversations we've already had and where we are in those conversations, we believe that that's achievable. So from Steve, always thought Zeus was a great move. They still fully engaged. Paul, do you want to take that one?
Well, thanks to Robin Bide, who's on this call. He wrote out a great note this morning, and Vicky hassled him all weekend, and he worked all day on a Sunday to get prepped. So, yes, I'll leave it to Robin to respond, but we think Zeus is a great team, and once their desk gets behind this story, it's exciting. It's an exciting UK story, and I think Robin made the comment once that once you get people up to site, it sells itself. So I think this will gain momentum. And just leading on to another point, it's a really good question, is obviously we're almost talking amongst friends on this call because people know the story and many people on the call are existing holders. What Vicky and I will be doing from now on will be out there spreading the gospel, particularly in the Northeast. And anybody who has any connection whatsoever with Teesside loves this story. Trust me, this is Teesside's got its own subculture. So we'll be tapping into that. So Vicky's opening an office in Darlington, and think town hall meetings, think people going to site, think a local community getting behind a local story. That will be a big focus for the company going forward.
Robin, I saw you came off mute, but I wasn't sure whether you wanted to say anything or not.
Yeah, well, just to say, thanks very much. We are very excited about the project. Obviously, there are quite a few milestones to be achieved, but no, Zeus is fully backing Alkemy Capital and TVL.
Thanks, Robin. So the next question is, subject to everything progressing as expected, when do you estimate first production to be? So our current schedule is based on that we will start our ramp-up period in the second half of 2027, and 2028 will probably achieve about 85% capacity in 2028. So we'll be ramping up and producing product towards the end of 2027 and then onwards into 2028. From Jordan, hi everyone, great news. Is the 31st July deadline enough time to secure finance, or can the deadline be extended? As with all agreements, there is a clause for a mutual extension of the timeframe should we need it. We don't believe we would, but that is we built some buffer into that time frame, so we believe we should be able to achieve it within that. But yes, we can extend it if needed. Gary's asked, is source spodumene from Western Australia still in the mix? We love Western Australia lithium, and yes, absolutely, we are still considering it. We are looking at it based on its current form and what the miners are currently doing over there. But we're looking at it, yes, for long-term supply opportunities. So yes, as we continue to expand, we need more sources of lithium coming in. So Western Australia spodumene is absolutely in the mix. It needs a step of processing before we would take it, because we don't believe you should ship that much spodumene to the UK. Spodumene contains about 94% waste, and we just don't believe that that's the right sort of process. But a number of the Western Australian miners and Alkemy itself is looking at converting spodumene to an intermediate product like a lithium sulfate in Western Australia, to then ship that product for processing and upgrading in the UK. So still in the mix, but a little bit of work to do to make that happen. So the next one, afternoon Vicky, great news today. Can I ask, what are the critical factors and timelines influencing the FID, and how does the partnership with ARA partners impact this decision? So we've talked about financing. You don't have an FID if you're not fully capitalized. So that's one of the critical milestones, and ARA play a significant part in that. And the other critical factors we've talked about, the FEED study, so that's the technical and our techno-economic model that comes off the back of that. That's really important to show that we've got long-term credibility for the project. But also feedstock and customer offtake. We have been very successful to date in securing a lot of interest for offtake, and as we progress through the FEED study, then we'll be looking to engage and to convert some of that to more definitive offtake agreements as we get ready for final investment decision. How are we doing for timing, Sasha? I'm just really racing through. Apologies, everybody.
You're good. You got 20
Okay.
minutes, 20 minutes,
Okay.
and
Okay.
the questions just keep on coming in.
I know. Okay, so I'm just scrolling those, Sasha. So I'm kind of stopped deleting them out. So I'm just kind of scrolling down at the moment. So congratulations. So from Dan, congratulations, guys. If you had a diary and timings worked perfectly, what would the plan look like going forward? I'm not going to give you exact dates because it never happens exactly as you anticipate it. But you've got our sort of proposed deadline for the ARA deal based on the exclusivity agreement. So, you know, as we say, we've built ourselves a bit of buffer, so we'd hope to achieve that as soon as we possibly can. The feed study is continuing, so again, that's due to complete towards the end of September. Ready for final investment decision. So just reiterating what we've already said, we're still in sort of progress for that. And then as soon as we've got a final investment decision, we'll begin construction. Are we still targeting a TVL IPO? Paul, do you want to take this one?
So the Alkemy model always was that we'd incubate companies like TVL, and then we decide what the best way of realizing value for shareholders is, and it can either be an IPO and we distribute shares to shareholders in species, or it can be purely a dividend flow, or it can be a trade sale down the track. So we're leaving that open. Either way, it doesn't matter whether it's an IPO or whether it's a dividend stream or a trade sale. The money will be flowing from TVL to Alkemy shareholders. So all this value that Vicky's creating will consider the best way for Alkemy shareholders to participate in it. I have to say, and just obviously this is something we'll consider down the track, and we'll talk to ARA as our partners. I think typically private equity doesn't like to go to market too early and much prefers to deal with cash flows and dividend streams. So if I had my bet of the three, I would say, and if we do end up going with ARA and it all goes according to plan, the strong cash flows from this growing business, I think, will be a very, very attractive dividend stream to Alkemy shareholders. But the caveat on that is we don't know. We'll make that decision down the track.
Okay, so just for those we've had 2 or 3 different questions coming in about the IPO, so I won't go over those questions again based on obviously Paul's answer there. We've been asked about because of the exclusivity period. It feels like we're placing a lot of reliance on completing the ARA funding, bearing in mind other deadlines. Are you as confident as you can be of it progressing to completion? You know, we're confident in ourselves. You know, we've explained obviously what TVL is, what we're aiming to do, what our vision is, what our project economics are, and ARA have agreed to you know, progress and ask for this exclusivity. So we're confident that we can make this happen. What I should assure you though is we will only do what's right for Alkemy and Alkemy shareholders. So you know, we are progressing and we are as confident as we can be that this will get this across the line. But we will protect TVL and Alkemy shareholders as we do that. Will there be a further exclusivity period for the debt funding with ABG? Paul, is there further exclusivity?
So ABG has a right of first refusal, but I think you're aware we've been working with ABG now for several months. So if you think of ARA as the equity piece and ABG as the debt piece, it will work. That is, ABG will work hand in hand with ourselves and ARA to get the debt piece in line for FID. So we're in effect working on the debt piece as we speak.
Yep. Okay. Can we assume the heads of terms have been agreed with ARA and that we are now progressing to formalising these into legal agreements? Or do the terms of their investment still depend on the results of future due diligence? So the data room is open. We continue those discussions with them. As we mentioned earlier on, before we agreed to exclusivity, there was an indicative term sheet, and that led us with the confidence that we felt that there was a deal that could be done, and that's how we're progressing on that basis. Paul, anything more to add to that?
No, that's exactly right. We're familiar with the private equity investment model. We're had it explained to us what ARA's partnership strategy looks like, and how it works. And internally, we felt that was a really good deal for Alkemy shareholders and a great long-term boost for TVL. So on the basis of, as we currently understand it, it's very attractive for Alkemy shareholders.
So there's a question about investors are also worried about how much their stake will be reduced. I think we can go back to in the first instance that for those of you who've been with the journey for a little while, there was always, as Alkemy as a holding company and as project financing at the asset level, there was always going to be a debt and an equity ratio. And that is still our vision, and that's still how that's progressing. The final structure of that will be determined, but we've accepted the exclusivity and we're progressing on the basis that we believe it's in the realms of where we've been discussing in the past. Paul?
Yes, I mean, the original model was the reason why we went down this track was the problem for junior listed companies on the London Stock Exchange is if you try to finance a $250 million asset and you have to raise $40 million worth of equity, $100 million, and you've got a market cap of 15 million, all shareholders are going to basically get diluted out of the game. So the structure we put in place by financing at the asset level means that the asset itself gets diluted. That is, the ownership in the asset gets diluted, but the holding company itself doesn't get diluted. So the net effect is you have a much bigger stake in the underlying company than you would is if you sat at the top co and tried to do it at the top co. I hope that makes sense.
Last few questions. I think we've almost got through it. What is the timeline for Touchstone to develop and bring online its South American asset? So their current schedule is that the asset would be online in 2026, so almost a full year ahead of when we would need the material. So we've got a great buffer zone there. But don't forget, we've also got our heads of terms in place with Wogan Resources, so we do have access to other material. So the combination of both, we believe, is a sufficient sort of feedstock strategy going forward. I'm gonna leave that one till last. What are the biggest risks you are left facing at present? Where I'm standing, this project seems extremely de-risked. Thank you. It's been a long piece of work, and we have been working. We've been taking a look at all of the different aspects that an investor and others, want to see, but also from ourselves, as we're putting, Alkemy's money and shareholders' money into the progress of TVL. So we're really, really keen to de-risk the project as possible. Look, I think we've de-risked what we can from a technology perspective. We continue to engage from an offtake perspective. And so that's kind of one of my key priorities over the coming month is to progress those conversations and get us just sort of to more secure. But from a particular project basis, I feel that, our top risks, we have been able to de-risk those quite significantly. Paul, I don't know if there's a particular risk that jumps out to you.
No, so just to make the point, is de-risking is progressive, and each of the elements that Vicky's mentioned, feedstock, offtake, technology partners, and now finance, each time we appoint somebody or achieve a milestone, it hugely de-risks the project. So a good example would be Veolia. Veolia basically will bring essentially a process guarantee to the project. And for financiers, that's incredibly valuable because it gives them confidence from a financing perspective. So each one of those partners brings something to the table, helps de-risk it to the point where we get to, as Vicky's mentioned, FID. And FID means we've de-risked it enough to be able to put finance in place and with the ability to draw down finance and build the project. So we are making each announcement, each step is a de-risking event to get us closer to FID.
Sasha, I think John's got his hand up, so I don't know if you want somebody else to talk other than me for 2 minutes.
Hi, thanks. I just have a follow-up question. Are you getting appropriate governmental support, either at a national or local level? And I don't necessarily mean just in terms of finance support.
And maybe I start off, Vicky, and
Yeah,
you give the
absolutely.
details.
Yeah.
So broadly, John, and this is very broadly, it's difficult for governments at the moment because they don't have a lot of money and they have to do big projects with big jobs involved. So British Steel and Geiger factories, and so that's where their attention's being drawn. So every time you hear there's a pot of money in a certain fund available for investment, it's being drawn down very rapidly by these high profile investments by government. So we are incredibly efficient. We don't actually employ many people. So although it's a very significant project, it's actually very efficient. So because we don't employ lots of people, we don't attract huge amounts of attention from government. Having said all of that, despite that, there is a recognition within government that it's an incredibly important project, and we are getting the key support we need in two key areas. One I'll let Vicky talk about in terms of grants, but the second one is energy cost. So one of the impediments to investing in the UK at the moment, you'll hear it all the time, is high energy costs. We've well advanced with negotiation under existing regulatory arrangements available to us on Teesside to really significantly pull down the energy costs, which is huge for us. So yes, government is supportive, but there's only so much you can do. So the two key areas, one is energy costs, and I'll allow Vicky to talk to you about where we are with the grant funding.
And thanks, Paul. The energy costs was something that was at the top of mind, actually.
Yeah. No, we are working hard on the energy cost to help keep that down, and also I would say from a feed study perspective as well, we're focusing on our energy efficiency in order to sort of diminish the impact of energy prices on our operational costs. We are advancing to the final stages of some funding through the government to support in a grant. I can't really go into too much detail about sort of the scale or whatever it is at this moment, but we've passed sort of preliminary stages, and we've kind of at the final hurdle and the final stage in order to progress that. But as with everything, it doesn't come quickly. So bear with us on that one. That is definitely not within our hands, the timing, and we'll keep you posted on it. What I would say more broadly as well from a government support, so Paul's attended a number of all-party parliamentary committees with regards to critical minerals, making sure that the right support, the right people are hearing about this. So we're kind of doing our own sort of fair share of lobbying and supporting in that kind of sense as well to help with the critical minerals industry. What time are we due to finish, Sasha? Sorry, just before.
5 minutes, Vicky.
5 minutes. Okay, perfect. So the last two questions that are in there. So the first one is from Adam. What price did Zeus put out on the back of this news? So Robin, I don't think you've reevaluated it from a finance sort of perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I would direct people to our initiation note from last March, which has a lot of detail on the project economics and the potential valuation at that time. And I would say our valuation was many multiples of the current market cap of Alkemy. Obviously, we have some work to do over the coming 6 to 8 weeks, assuming the ARA transaction completes. So I will be updating my project economics and valuation model. So please bear with us on that. But if you look at our original initiation notes, and if you go to Zeus Capital and our research site or contact me directly, you can see our initial thoughts. And as I say, the valuation was a multiple many times the current valuation of Alkemy Capital, as you can see on your screen. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Robin. There has been a request that we put those Zeus notes on the Alkemy website, so we'll take that offline and see what we can get sorted for you and provide access to those. The final one sorry, another one's just come in, but you mentioned graphite, and Syra is on the back burner for now, but are you still in I think that's supposed to say close contact with them?
No, we're focused on lithium trains 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the moment, but graphite's really nothing progressed in the short term. We've frankly got our hands full, but the one that's coming up quite strongly is manganese. So right now, Vicky has her hands full with trains 1. Already got people banging on the door for train 2, and so we've got enough on our plate at the moment. We don't need to. It's there for the future for working with potentially our future partner Ara, but it's not something to get too distracted with right now.
Okay, and then the final question in the Q&As now is, what are you doing to get the story out to new shareholders, high net worth individuals, family funds, etc.? So we are now advancing or progressing. This obviously is an open call, that we put out there on an RNS reach to try to, and we are engaging with investors or potential investors. Obviously we've got Zeus on board as well, supporting. Paul, is there anything else you want to add into that?
No, I think it's a really good question, and I think it's a fair comment because we've been fairly quiet until now. I'm talking amongst ourselves, to be perfectly frank. So, as I mentioned earlier, Vicky's opening an office in Darlington, and we will be looking to get out amongst the local community, so to speak, and building a following around what is going to be an amazing Teesside story. So we're very much building around the Teesside thematic, which most people on this call will know has got a huge profile. And just to give you some idea of the scale of this, is that when you go on site, is the site that Vicky's got for us there, it sits right next door to a 1 gigawatt BESS battery energy storage, a 1 gigawatt data storage, a multi-gigawatt BP net zero carbon capture storage into the Never Formation, and a 1.2 kilometer long offshore wind turbine stanchion factory. It's huge. It's gigawatt scale developments happening on Teesside. And as you stand there looking at it, you can actually see the wind farm on a good day. You can see the wind farm out the sea. This is something that doesn't exist in Europe, or certainly not in Australia. This is a unique location. It's basically been deindustrialized and reindustrialized. It's an exciting major, and as I say, it's gigawatt scale. There's not many places in the world where things have been developed at this scale, all in one location. So we think Teesside will sell itself. We just need to get people up there, see what Vicky's doing, see the sheer scale of it, and it's an exciting UK story.
So for those of you who are who've been on with us the journey so far, it's great, and hopefully you're starting to feel the momentum building with the project, and as we progress and delivering on this potential investment with Aura, and for those of you who are new to the story, sort of welcome. We're always interested in hearing your feedback and your understanding of the project, and for anybody who's wanting to learn more, feel free to reach out to us or reach out to Zeus, and we can talk you through more of the project fundamentals that we've maybe skipped over here today.